Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Indie2Indie. We are currently covering some of the developers of the shorter games with worse graphics bundle, and today I am joined by.
Gabriel Koenig.
Great. And you contributed Test Tube Titans to the game, to the bundle.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right. About how long have you been making games?
I think I started back in 2013.
Okay, so actually that was about when
Seven,
I did too. Yeah, so it's been close to 8 years then.
yeah,
Yeah.
been a long time.
Mm-hmm. Long time for indies, especially. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. How exactly did you get into making games?
I was originally working doing QA at a couple bigger studios, and then I wanted to get into sound design for games,
Hmm.
and it was really difficult to get hired as a sound designer. So I ended up just learning how to do Unity so I could make my own games, so I could do my own sound,
Hmm.
so that I could actually do sound design for games. So it was like a really big workaround to, but then I ended up getting more into making games than actually doing the sound design,
Hmm.
ironically.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of doing that. I've seen a couple of people who, do music for games and whatnot, but that's definitely an uncommon path. Starting in sound and then moving over to just doing it all on your own for that. Especially if it's not like rhythm games or something where sound is the predominant focus. Um, So why exactly do you make games? Is it just, at this point, is it still because you want to do sound design, or what is it that's really motivating you at this point?
I think it's a just a general compulsion to create, and games are kind of a all-encompassing format that you can bring in, like you can bring in writing, you can bring in art, you can bring in music, sound, all that stuff. And I think it's the easiest way to kind of combine all these ideas into something that's presentable and that you can actually put in front of people and they can engage with it,
Hmm.
which is really fun.
Hmm. There's there's definitely a difference between, because you say it's an easy way to do all of that, and I personally find it to be a nightmarish way to do all of that. I mean, it's the sort of thing that, if a person plays guitar and is a musician, they can go out onto the corner with a hat and get money off of that. For us, we would have to make sure that we have electricity, probably need Wi-Fi, um, and then have something that is actually presentable and enjoyable for people to watch as you make the thing. Like, it is definitely a unique thing, and I do agree that games are an enjoyable thing at the end of the day, and there's no medium quite like them. But yeah, it definitely is something that takes a lot to get into. Um, so do you consider this a job, or is this really more of just a hobby for you?
I'm in a weird spot with that right now because I've been self-employed. I think I'm coming up on maybe 4 years now that I've been fully just doing my own stuff, and
Right.
I've lost like 20 grand this year out of my pocket
Mm.
because just haven't been selling anything new. But um, next year we'll see if I have this new game coming out, and yeah, it's constantly like, should I get a job now or should I keep pushing my own stuff forward a little bit? And yeah, I don't mind needing to go back to something else, but I think I'll try to stay doing this full time for as long
Hmm.
as I can.
For sure. Um, so is it really just games that you're doing, or are you also like releasing soundtracks or doing any freelancing?
Yeah, I did a little bit of freelancing stuff. I did some music, and I think I did like some help. I helped an artist with an installation, but not too much freelancing stuff comes my way. So
Right.
it's mostly just doing my own stuff and like a little bit of music, but that doesn't really sell anything compared to the game sales.
Hmm. Understandable. Um, so let's actually talk about your game that's in the bundle, Test Tube Titans. So how many people were on that team? Was it really just you? Did you have any testers?
It was, yeah, it was largely just me. Someone very kindly approached me who was interested in doing sound for the game, and I told them I had no budget for the game, but they put in their own time and made a ton of great sounds for me. So that was awesome. And then I did have help with kind of testing out new ideas and getting feedback and stuff from a small group on Discord, which
Hmm.
is great.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can get a good testing group for the game, especially. Um, so what engine did you use to make the game?
I used Unity.
Hmm.
That's what I used since I started learning how to make games. So it's by far the most comfortable thing for me. And I feel like every time I jump into a new project, it's easier for me to start getting ideas fleshed out. And yeah, it's just every time I go back to it, it's a little bit easier.
Hmm. So is that why you still use it? And then why you used it for this game is just because it's really the most comfortable thing for you?
Yeah, I think so. I tried downloading Unreal just out of curiosity this year, but it did not like my computer, so I had to uninstall it again.
Yeah, no, it's some engines are very intensive with the way that they want to do things. Um, yeah, I've done all of my work on laptops. I mean, my first games I made on a netbook that had 1 gig of RAM.
That's
Word
impressive.
processors had a hard time keeping up. So yeah, I definitely understand, your own limitations with your hardware needing to be able to deal with whatever engine. Um, so why did you make this game? What is it about, Test Tube Titans that made you think of it and go, oh, I should really do something with this?
I think it was largely inspired by the previous game that I made, and it was kind of like a totally different tangent, but taking similar ideas and
Mhm.
saying, what if I made a totally different game using some of the same ideas and did this?
Right. What
Uh,
was the previous game?
it was Jet Omero. So that game was a largely story-based game about being a giant robot where you're exploring the universe and trying not to destroy things, but you do because you're a clumsy big robot.
Right.
And so with Test Tube Titans, I thought, what if you're actually supposed to destroy things? Because a lot of people seem to enjoy destroying things in Jet Omero. And so I wanted to explore that and just see how fun I can make the destruction element of it.
Because yeah, I looked at the game and it definitely gave me that like Rampage vibes.
Yeah,
Um, but then there's the procedural generation you have on top of that, right? Um, so actually, a question I have: why did you go for procedural generation? Like, what was it about that you thought, oh, this should be in the game?
I think that was one of the main things that I wanted to explore with it was how I could make different creatures make the game replayable by having every time you play it, the physics and the shapes of the creatures are procedurally generated because there aren't a lot of games that give you that really core element of the game that's constantly shifting, and I thought that would be a fun thing to play around with.
Hmm. I gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. I always have particular thoughts about procedural generation. I do enjoy roguelikes. I'm absolutely abysmal at them, but I do enjoy them. I enjoy the concept, I guess. Um, but there is a lot of I'll see people talk about doing procedural generation in their games because they think it's easier, when it is something that I believe is very difficult to do, at least to do right. Like, sure, you can set up an algorithm for it to do a thing, but there needs to be a true procedure to the generation. There needs to be like a point and purpose to it. Otherwise, whatever you're doing really doesn't actually need it. Um, so it's nice to see like procedural generation in a different way than we're accustomed to. Not
Mm-hmm.
just necessarily like abilities, but also like really how the character initially even functions and appears. Um, so why did you go for the particular aesthetic and look and feel for this game?
Um, part of it was just because I'm working alone and don't have the time and ability to necessarily make a really polished looking thing.
Hmm.
But I also wanted to reference like classic monster movies and Godzilla stuff and just have a very retro aged vibe.
Gotcha. I mean, it also fits, sort of almost B movie-ish feel to it, you know, no problem with that. Um, how long did it take to make the game?
I think it was just under 2 years, like maybe 20 to 22 months or something like that.
Okay, so significant investment of time.
Yeah, it
And
was.
is it full-time-ish or?
For the most part, yeah. I was finishing up a couple things. I did a port of Jet Omero during that time, but
Mhm,
for the most part, I think it was a lot of full time
gotcha.
hours going into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. I've worked on games that long, but they also did not very well. So, but yeah, no, it's I'm always impressed when somebody is actually willing to be able to put in that many hours to a project and really, you know, make it the way that they wanted to see it made. Um, would you say you learned anything from making it, whether about game design or engine use or?
Yeah, there were tons of things I learned about it. Kind of a lot about the process of making games and how to, like, I thought that I'd have more traction because I'd have the game being played earlier. Like,
Hmm.
I released the game a year ahead of time so people could play early versions. And it didn't really get any traction. And I thought that was something that would work because with my previous game, I hadn't done any of that. And it all kind of fell flat, which was a little bit disappointing. But I think yeah, trying out a bunch of different ideas and then seeing what worked and what didn't work, and definitely gave me lots to think about moving forward.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something I've talked to a few people about whenever they ask me, like, oh, what should I work on? Because I have all these ideas. I'm like, well, firstly, I don't have that many ideas, so I never really have that problem. I usually have like a project and then a side project, and that's basically it for me. And then eventually I'll have a new thought that I'll jot down and I'll work on it for like a week, and maybe I'll elaborate on it, and maybe I'm like, no, this is trash. But I do enjoy taking a month to just make like or even just a week to make a decent prototype of a game and then put it on itch.io and see like, okay, let's put up some screenshots, let's put up a GIF, let's see if this gains any traction on Twitter or whatever. And if people respond to it, then I'm like, okay, well maybe this is actually worth elaborating on because at least something's going right. Even if I had one where I got a lot of negative comments and reviews, but I was at least getting feedback. I was like, okay, so something is here. I need to dig for it, but something is here. Um, so yeah, it's definitely rapid prototyping if people are at all able to do it. Or if we're going to talk like real business terms, MVP, minimum viable product, which is, you know, it's how business often works. It's just, can you get this small thing out of there? Doesn't matter how it looks, just is the core mechanic present and do people actually think that that's worth something? Um, but yeah, that's my little design rant for the day. Um, So, are you happy with the game? Do you feel like it was worth the time, the money, the effort to work on it?
Yeah, for sure. I think it turned out to be basically everything I would have hoped for. There were a few things that I might have done a little bit differently, but overall, it was. I feel good about it. I think it's a fun game. Um, yeah, the only thing that didn't quite go as well as I'd hoped was the reception.
Hmm.
And but everyone who played it, or a lot of people who played it, seemed to really enjoy it. So that was the most important thing for me.
Hmm. So really the hard thing was just like finding a proper market for the game, really.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I make niche games, so I understand. Um, how would you, because you've made a few games at this point, right? How would you describe the games that you make? Is there like a general theme, or is it just really more what strikes you as interesting at the time?
I think I definitely go for more experimental with my last few games. Trying to do something that's very different, like taking ideas from other games, but then trying out something that won't necessarily that's something new, I guess. I'm
Hmm.
more interested in doing something that's new than trying to figure out a way to twist some other throw a spin on something that's already been done
Right,
as
right.
much, because I just can't compete with a bigger studio. Like I need to try something different if I want it to be anything at all, because otherwise I can't compete with a team
Right,
of even
right,
3 people.
right. I get that. It's definitely tough to stand out when there's so many people already doing that thing. Um, that's also something I see are people like now that Among Us is popular, people are going for the social deception games and trying to get that, and it's already pretty much like 2 years too late at this point. Is basically how that works. Like once that gets popular, because that game had already been out for a year, and you had other games like Aggro and whatnot where it's also more social deception stuff. But now that it's popular, people are trying to catch on, and it's like, no, the market already is saturated. Like you can try, and I hope for the best for you, but it is difficult. Um, Although I will say there is something to be said for people if you can execute well. Like if your execution really is just fantastic. I mean, Super Meat Boy is well known when platformers were dominating the market because it just the feel and the wall jumping and everything like it all felt really really good. And then you had the different characters that all had their own feel to it. um, so I will say that if your execution really is fantastic and you do have the time and ability to do that, then that's worth at least considering. But at least in the indie scene, it really is just as much originality as you can put into things too, because you need to be able to get people to stop and actually look at your game page, you know. Um, so do you have a favorite game that you've made?
I'm not sure if I do. I kind of like all my games for different reasons, or at least between Jet Marrow and Test Tube Titans. I think it's tough. Jet Marrow is kind of a more charming game, but Test Tube Titans definitely more fun. I love that it has multiplayer. It's kind of a wild, crazy game to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite.
If I said you had to,
Oh man, I guess I might pick Jet Marrow just because it's more charming.
okay. Um, So let's say that you had an infinite amount of time, as many people as you needed, whoever it was, however much money you wanted, to make a game. What would the game be that you make?
There's there's so many good options, but one game. What I wanted to do with Test Tube Titans originally was make a game that was way more um, granular, I guess, where
Mm-hmm.
you're creating organisms from literally nothing. And I think it would take a lot of machine learning and just a lot more process to it. It would be a very like hands-off game where you're um, letting things grow and trying things out with them and letting them evolve into larger creatures, but in a totally organic, machine learning driven system. And I think
So,
that would be something I'd love to do.
so a little more like a God game almost, but also sort of like Spore,
Yeah,
where
yeah, kind of like Spore, but if it was all procedurally driven and machine learning,
mhm.
and you kind of made decisions about which creatures you wanted to continue to grow in your lab and which ones you'd be like, okay, this is clearly turning into a path that is not beneficial or is like
Not
creating
viable,
some
not
weird.
sustainable,
Yeah, yeah,
mutated. Okay,
yeah. So
that would
kind
be.
of
Go
what I
ahead.
was doing with Test Tube Titans, but on a much more granular scale. And yeah, that would be a fun game to do.
Hmm. I would absolutely play that game as somebody that enjoyed like Black and White and Spore. You know, that would be a really fun thing to see. I hope you eventually acquire infinite time and resources. um, what would you say you like about making games?
I think the freedom that comes with being able to create an entire world from home on my laptop is really cool.
Hmm.
I went to school for filmmaking, and that's such a demanding process where you have to put in long days and get an entire crew together just to get a couple shots for a movie. And if you mess up a couple things, you can't easily go back and change a few things. Whereas making a game, you can always go back and tweak things, you can perfect it, you can iterate. It's just a really free process to realize your vision, I think,
Hmm.
which is so cool.
Is there anything you really just don't enjoy about making games?
I think the marketing process and just finishing the game and getting it out there,
Hmm.
at that point, it's like I wish I just could jump into the middle of a new game in the middle of the development cycle instead of having to deal with a game being out in the world and being anxious about it. I
Hmm. Yeah,
think that's the worst part.
I enjoy like starting games. In the thick of it, I have a love-hate relationship depending on what I'm working on. Um, but yeah, the last little bit, like the last couple weeks, or even what you think is going to be just a couple more weeks, it is tough. And I've seen, students at GDC and stuff talk about, oh yeah, I've made this game for this jam, and I'm like, it's good, and it's definitely better to have some experience than none at all. But some of them are like, oh, I want to go to be in India. I'm like, do your best to try and release a commercial game while you're still safe at home, because going through that whole process teaches you a lot, both about games and about yourself, because launching a game that takes a lot of effort. And you find out it's really a miracle any game ever gets made. Um, but yeah, no, I definitely understand not enjoying that. Um, is there something in games that you feel everyone's going to have to incorporate at some point? Whether it's, voice acting or, a particular marketing strategy, VR.
I would say I really hope not, because I think that's one of the strengths of games is the diversity of how those formats can play out. Like you can have a game that's just a simple 2D puzzle game, you can have a game that's a really immersive 3D game, you can have VR, you can have voiceover, all those things in different types of games. But I don't think there's any one aspect to games that I would want to see across the board and everything.
Hmm. Um, is there something you think indie games and studios can do better than AAA games and studios?
I think the risk taking is a huge advantage that indies have
Hmm.
over a big studio. Like a big studio, they can't create really weird, unique games the same way, or maybe they can, but it's like Death Stranding.
Right.
But it's still you're still limited, and it's not very often that you can do that. Whereas an indie can take a crazy idea, whip something out, and then yeah, it's way more exciting to see what comes out of an indie's brain than this kind of corporate manufactured thing from a AAA studio that is just iterating on a proven formula.
Hmm. Right, right. Um, for our last really game-related question here, do you have any advice for people who want to get into making games?
I think, well, for my experience, I think just forcing myself to sit down and make stuff and not necessarily worrying um, about how it does, and also just kind of making a game that you enjoy and not trying to make a game that you think other people will enjoy.
Hmm.
I think that's one thing that I've definitely stuck to that has kept me sane working on games for several years at a time.
Hmm.
Where as long as I'm behind the concept 100%, then it's a lot easier to feel good about it on most days.
Right, right. I understand. Um, so I have an ending survey that is, made to get to know you better. Um, what would you say is your favorite virtue?
I think truthfulness
Hmm.
is my favorite. I think that goes a long way.
Hmm. That's that's true. Um, what would you say is the principal aspect of your personality, like at your core?
I don't know, maybe I don't know if it's a personality thing, but determination
I will
or
qualify that.
okay, maybe maybe that. Yeah, it's there's also the like just kind of being happy with being weirder and trying to do my own thing more.
Hmm.
It's always been kind of always been a large part of how I operate.
Hmm. What are your favorite qualities in a person?
I think honesty and reliability and humor. I think
Hmm.
those three things are, if I meet someone with those qualities, then it's easy to get along with.
Hmm. Yeah, humor is so important, or at least compatible humor. I've met people who thought they were funny, and I'll leave it at that. Um, what do you appreciate the most in your friends?
um, I think, yeah, it's probably similar stuff like reliability and being able to make me laugh.
Hmm. What would you say is probably your main fault or flaw?
I'm pretty bad at showing enthusiasm when I don't have any. If I think something's stupid, then I'm not going to pretend that I like it or that I'm happy with it. And often that gets me in trouble.
I can understand that a lot. Um, what is your favorite way to spend time?
Um, Usually either creating content or consuming content or consuming food,
Hmm.
whether it's listening to music or watching TV or playing a video game or making video games or making music. All that stuff is, um, yeah, it's all inspiring if you're watching it, and then when you're making it, it's just kind of a fun exploratory thing.
Hmm. Um, you mentioned food. Do you cook much?
Yeah, yeah, I love cooking.
Good. Um, I really enjoy cooking. It was funny. It was about a year ago now, so it's been on my mind. I moved and I was talking to a friend and I was like putting away all my spices that I had, which was like 10 to 15, I forget. It's not like a ton, but it's enough and pretty much all of it was still pretty fresh. Um, and so I took a picture and sent that to my friend, and then she sent me her spice rack, and I was like, "Oh, now we're bonding. Like this I agree with." Like, so yeah, I always have an appreciation for other people who enjoy cooking. Um,
It's yeah, it's such a rewarding thing to enjoy doing because you get to appreciate it every single day,
mhm.
and you can share it with other people really easily.
Right, right. And it's something that, like certain days I'm just not in the mood for it, but then there's other days where I'm like, oh no, now I'm gonna make like all of this stuff. So, um, yeah, no, it's also, I find, especially in this sort of a business where we're so constantly plastered to technology, that it's nice to have something that you can interact with in a physical way that you
Yeah,
can then enjoy in a very physical way, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um, Also hits different senses, you know, you actually get the taste, you get the smell, which you can't get from your computer unless things are going very badly. Um,
And cooking also saves you a lot of money, which is
yes,
nice. Makes it
yes.
easier to make games when you're cooking your own fancy restaurant meals
Hmm.
for a quarter of the price.
Right, exactly. Um, so, what would you say is your idea of happiness?
I think freedom to explore ideas and also being surrounded by people who I can communicate with in a positive way.
Hmm. What is your idea of misery?
Probably being forced to do something that I don't want to do.
Hmm. If not yourself, who would you like to be?
Probably someone like Batman. know there's no actual Batman, but take a page from that book and then try something like that.
Okay. So, I do have to ask, are you talking more like the vigilante aspect or the philanthropic billionaire aspect?
Probably the yeah, not the Bruce Wayne, the Batman side of it. So
Right. So,
nighttime vigilante ninja.
okay, I gotcha. Um, where would you like to live?
I think where I am right now in Vancouver, Canada, is might be my favorite place to be. It would be nice to live on an island,
Hmm.
not so far away, because it's just kind of nice being out of the city and being surrounded by trees and ocean.
Hmm.
But um, otherwise, I'm pretty happy with where I am right now. Fortunately,
That's good. Um, what's your favorite color?
I always say that it's red.
Is it red?
I think it is.
What's your favorite flower?
Oh, I feel like I had an answer for this one, and now I don't know. I'll say what flower I really don't like, which is the orchid, because I feel like orchids are super aggressive looking, and they look like they're little aliens that want to eat my face off.
Okay, I can see that. I'll accept that as an answer. Thank you for you're the first person that actually answered a flower, which, as someone who likes flowers, I'm very happy about. Um, what's your favorite animal?
It's either the crow or the octopus. I like
I
both of them.
I appreciate those, yeah. Um, they're definitely the sorts of animals that I would like as a pet, but I know that they're very smart, and it would be nice to have like that sort of interaction, but also they would be impossibly high maintenance because they really are just like small people. You know, they have their own wants and desires and things, and that would be something that I would have to like schedule around. Because I've seen, you know, keepers of parrots and ravens and stuff, and these are all like really smart creatures, but they and definitely full of personality, but also that's kind of their entire job at that point, um, and that's a
Yeah,
big part of the life. Um, so yeah, I personally I really like those sorts of animals, but yeah, that's I appreciate them from a distance.
yeah.
Do you have any favorite authors?
I think Douglas Adams is someone I really appreciated when I first read Hitchhiker's Guide.
Hmm.
That sense of humor, and then I haven't been reading nearly enough recently, but I've been reading the Jeff Vandermeer,
Okay,
is it, who did the Annihilation trilogy, and reading one of his other books now, and that stuff is really great sci-fi that
hmm,
I've been loving.
cool. Um, any favorite developers?
Um, I think it's difficult because I might have a favorite game, but then the next game I'm not as much of a fan of.
Right, right.
But I think the people who did Hohokam, I really like most of the stuff that they've been doing since then and before then.
Hmm. Do you have any favorite heroes or heroines, fiction or otherwise? I will accept villains just because, out of curiosity, everybody's their own hero, I guess.
Oh, I as far as real life people go, and it's not a hero, but I think Tim Heidecker is one of the people that I look up to creatively, at least.
Hmm. Okay. Um, any favorite painters or composers?
Not not particularly. I think I like taking a little bit of everything.
Hmm.
Like if I had to choose a favorite painter to put around my house, it would be really difficult because everything is good in moderation.
Hmm. Do you have any, well, for my last question here, any special or particular talents? Anything weird you're able to do?
I think I'm pretty good at eating things that most people wouldn't want to eat. Like sometimes I'll do shots of apple cider vinegar just for that intense. I've eaten full cloves of garlic just for the intense experience that it brings on, especially if I'm feeling sick, because it kind of makes me forget that I'm sick.
Hmm.
Which is, and I don't think most people I tell should do that. They don't want to do it. So
Yeah, I apple cider vinegar. That's rough. That is. Oh, I I've been known about food abominations. I've definitely participated in some of those. Um, but that's rough. I don't think I could do a shot of that and, keep everything in. Um, well, on that note, I think that's all my questions. Is there anything that you want to add or anything?
no, but thanks for the opportunity to talk, and thanks for organizing this bundle too.
Hmm. Is there anything that you want to share, talk about real quick, like, socials, game pages, etc.?
I did just write a postmortem for Test Tube Titans last on the weekend, just a few days ago.
Okay.
So that was good to finally get that out because I had released the game back in March.
Hmm.
So if anyone's checking out the game, I'd recommend checking out the postmortem too, since that's all kind of my thoughts around this past year summed up.
Cool. Okay, so I'll drop a link to that in the description, along with your Twitter and itch page. Anything else?
No, I think that's everything.
Okay, great. Um, well, that is it for me. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for joining me today, Gabriel. And we will catch you all next time. Thank you all for watching. Bye.